After the abrupt cancellation of Pickford's party, the Dazed crew replaces it with a beer bust or keg party at the so-called Moontower. If you ask me, this was a better venue to begin with. No neighbors around to complain about the noise and the cars parked on the street. Some questions came to mind as a young teenager when I saw Dazed and Confused for the first time. How could mostly 17-year-olds so easily acquire alcohol? How could a bunch of kids have a party at this light tower thing that appears to be located in a park or something and not get caught? What is a moon tower anyway? It is hard to imagine a time in America when the legal drinking age was under 21. I live in the state of Pennsylvania, founded by the Quakers, where the drinking age has always been 21. But in other parts of the country, laws were different. With respect to Texas liquor laws, the drinking age had been 21 until 1973, when it was lowered to 18. The reason for this was the ratification of the 26th Amendment, which lowered the voting age to 18 from 21 for the entire country. This was the result of the anti-Vietnam War protests of the late 60s and early 70s, led by young Americans who were subject to be drafted at age 18 to serve in the military. Prior to this amendment, an American was not considered an adult until age 21. Texas felt if you are an adult legally responsible for yourself at 18, who can vote and serve in the military, then you should be able to buy alcohol too. Other states agreed. However, eventually all 50 states were forced to raise their legal drinking ages to 21 under President Ronald Reagan in the early 80s. A special interest group known as Mothers Against Drunk Driving successfully lobbied the president to change the legal drinking age. Reagan tied highway funding to liquor laws. If a state did not raise its drinking age to 21, then it would not receive highway funding from the federal government. All states fell in line quickly. The seniors that we see in Dazed and Confused were most likely only 17, but some may have been 18 and thus legally able to purchase alcohol. All they needed was one or two 18-year-olds to supply the whole group. Let's consider another factor, though. I grew up in the 80s and 90s under the rise of zero tolerance when it came to drunk driving. When I was a little kid, there were all of these PSA commercials that had messages like, "Don't drink and drive," or "Friends don't let friends drive drunk." None of these existed in the 70s. Drunk driving was probably a ticket. People used to say the cop would just command you to go straight home back then. In the Making of Dazed documentary, Ben Affleck says to the camera in O'Banion costume that you can see how permissive the 70s was when it came to alcohol. He said, "Every time I'm behind the wheel of a car in this movie, I have a beer in my hand," which was just a prop, of course. He compared that to the 90s, saying that today, that would be very taboo. The kids in Dazed didn't care because they were young, but also because society in general was just more permissive with that kind of thing. According to the Austin History Center, moonlight towers, as they are called, are 165 feet tall and serve as a light source for several parts of the city. 31 of them were erected in 1895, supplied with power by a nearby power plant. Only 17 of these exist today. I am from the East Coast and have never heard of these ever, but they are real. Those that still exist aren't in the thick of the grid layout of the city, though. They are located in an area with some grass around them. There are several support cables that go from various points up the tower and lead to the ground where they are staked down in some way. These cables prevent the tower from swaying too much. There is a ladder built up through the center of the tower for a person to climb to service the lights. These towers, however, were located in the city close to population. It is logical that a party occurring at the base of one would likely get broken up by police. The writer-director of Dazed, Richard Linklater, described partying at the Fire Tower in the book All Right, All Right, All Right, the oral history of Richard Linklater's Dazed and Confused. Please read it. It is great. So in the book, he describes the fire tower as being a distance away from the prying eyes and ears of grown-up homeowners. At the base of those towers, kids could congregate to party. What is a fire tower? Austin, Texas is at moderate risk of wildfire. Texas is hot, flat, and has a tendency to be dry. Decades ago, the state government felt it necessary to build fire towers in certain areas so that firefighters could have a high perch to view the spread of potential wildfires. These towers did not resemble what we see in the film. They had a metal latticework structure for support. There were several levels of wooden staircases which zigzagged upward until you reached the top. Perched there was what almost looks like a backyard shed, a small hut-looking thing with a pitched roof. On all sides were window cutouts so that through binoculars, fire personnel could peer out to view the fires. At some point, either the necessity of these towers went away or state funding to maintain them dried up, or both. Put simply, by the time the 70s hit, there were old rundown fire towers in Texas in rural areas waiting to be repurposed by teenagers. The fire towers made for an easy landmark for kids to meet. Teens found it a fun challenge to ascend them, whether they understood the risk to that or not. The metal frame was in good condition, but the wooden stairs would often be loose or rotted away. Kids had to carefully navigate the gaps in the dark. Writer-director Richard Linklater says that he had the fire tower in mind when writing the Moontower scenes, as there was an old fire tower outside of town where he grew up in Huntsville, Texas. Just because the tower was away from houses didn't mean that kids could congregate without consequence. To meet at the fire tower was something that wasn't planned in advance with a lot of promotion. It was an impromptu decision whose message was put out quickly and on the down low, because if too much word spread, the cops would find out. Linklater chose the Moonlight Tower, or Moontower as it is known in the film, because it was more authentic to Austin for the kids to be there instead of the fire tower. Besides, Party at the Moontower sounds better than Party at the Fire Tower, right? The Moontower we see in the film was built as a set piece by the actual company that maintains those towers. It was much smaller than the real ones, standing only 25 to 30 feet high. But that's still really tall if you're the one climbing it.